Time enough for another Tarzan movie to watch and review. What do you think? Tarzan and the She-Devil from 1953 features the Lord of the Jungle, as played by Lex Barker, facing off against some nefarious ivory poachers who want to harm Tarzan's beloved elephants. But we know he's not going to let that happen. I'll take a look at the film, spoiler-free, and then offer some closing thoughts. Well, the film opens up with a narration that nicely summarizes that Tarzan is the hero of the jungle. And here we see Lex Barker in the role as Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle. And he's also the Tarzan that, of all the Tarzans I've watched so far, probably has the nicest hair. And then we cut over to some ne'er-do-wells. There's Raymond Burr as the evil character Vargo. He's hanging out with his evil henchman Lavar, who's played by actor Michael Granger. And the two of them are conspiring about how they can exploit the ivory trade, all these elephants that they can get rich from. Tarzan, meanwhile, he's at home and he sees Jane. She's played here by actress Joyce McKenzie. She was a lovely actress, and I believe this is her one and only outing as a character of Jane. Now, she's pretty sleepy, but Tarzan wants his breakfast, so he's going to wake her up, but oh, that silly cheetah hasn't gathered any eggs yet. So they send her out, and when Jane tries to go back to sleep again, well, Tarzan, he has a plan to wake her up.
Good morning.
Oh, for fun. Well, Cheetah is gathering ostrich eggs and has a run-in with a mean ostrich that doesn't seem too happy with Cheetah taking the eggs away, but she manages to grab one, brings it back home, so that Tarzan and Jane can have a nice omelet for breakfast. Now, Vargo goes to meet with the character of Lyra, played by Monique Van Voren, who is the she-devil of this film. Now, the two of them team up with Tom Conway's character, Fidel, and they are going to work together to get these ivory tusks. Their plan is to go in and take this tribe of Lycopos, and they're going to take these natives captive to do their bidding. Well, some of the Lycopos women, they go to Tarzan, and they let him know that their men have been captured. So Tarzan swings into action. So these natives are being held captive, and they're playing music, and there's dancing around a fire that night when Tarzan makes his move. And I actually really like the framing of this particular shot as Tarzan, from the jungle, he sees the distant lights, and then he moves in. Now, Lyra, Fidel, and Vargo, the trio of evildoers, they celebrate with a drink, but we can see that these two guys don't really get along very well. That could be a problem later. Now, Tarzan, meanwhile, he goes into stealth mode, and he drops in. He subdues the guards and takes their guns. All the while, the drumming kind of continues. It's a nice musical backdrop to Tarzan's stealth action. He gathers up the guns and drops them in a well because, as we all know, Tarzan hates guns. Now, the natives make their escape, and they are partially apprehended again. Tarzan gets into a fight with the soldiers, and he tries to escape as well, but he gets into a man-to-man fight with one of the tough guys, Selim, played by actor Michael Ross. You know, he's one of those tough guy actors I've seen before in films like DOA with Edmund O'Brien. It's actually a pretty cool fight scene, but come on, it's Tarzan. So even though this Selim guy has a knife, well, you know, Tarzan takes care of him. Well, Tarzan goes to visit with the grateful Lycopos people, and they are now practicing for war with bows and arrows, and even boomerangs on strings. And they give Tarzan a necklace medallion as a gift. All the while, Cheetah tries her hand at throwing a boomerang as well. Haha, it's silly. Well, a little later, the characters Lyra, Fidel, and Vargo, the evildoers, they go to visit with Tarzan. And they plead with him, try to convince him to help them with their elephant drive. But we know better. Tarzan not kill elephant. And he refuses, of course. Well, they leave, but Lyra has an evil scheme to take Jane as a prisoner, and then they can get Tarzan to do their bidding. Well, that evening, Tarzan and Jane, they have a romantic snuggle out under the stars, and she teases him that Lyra was quite lovely. Beautiful, says Tarzan. And then she teases that Vargo was quite handsome. Raymond Burr? Really, Jane? Well, a little later, they lure Tarzan away, making him think that raiders have attacked again. And now, while he is gone, some of the goons arrive at the house and try to grab Jane. Now she resists them, and in the scuffle, there's a lantern is knocked over, the hut is set on fire, and she's able to use this opportunity to escape as the hut burns. Now Tarzan, meanwhile, arrives at the village, and that sneaky Vargo character shoots at the tree branch under his feet, causing him to fall. They capture him and tie him up. Now Jane, meanwhile, is trapped in swampy water with an alligator and a giant snake. So Tarzan's been tied up, but on hearing that they couldn't find Jane and that there was an accident at his tree hut, well, Tarzan snaps his bindings and heads home as quick as he can. He returns to the smoky wreckage of his home, and I thought this was another nicely framed scene of Tarzan. He's standing there, examining the desolation of his home. Cheetah has found the necklace that Jane was wearing and brings it to a sad Tarzan as he realizes Jane is gone. Well, Vargo and his men arrive and they subdue Tarzan, and he doesn't put up much of a fight. In fact, he's pretty much filled with grief for most of the rest of the film. At this point, we're about 40 minutes into the movie. However, he doesn't know Jane is alive, and she is still on the run through the jungle. But she's been weakened by her attack, the fiery hut, the alligators and snakes and so on, so she collapses. But a friendly elephant comes along and helpfully brings her to the nearby village for help. So Tarzan, meanwhile, he is in chains, and the poor guy has just given up the fight. Vargo orders him to stand up, and when he refuses, he grabs a whip and slashes at poor Tarzan, but Tarzan, it just doesn't seem to faze him. He's just emotionally stunned here. Now Lyra meets with Tarzan, tries to appeal to him to help them. I kind of expected her to, turn on the sugar a little bit, but no, she just sort of matter-of-factly tries to convince him to help them out, so that his friends won't get hurt, But Tarzan only replies with, "Why you killed Jane?" Well, at the Lycopos village, the medicine man tries to help Jane recover. Tarzan, meanwhile, is just being marched along with the other prisoners on their trek, and they arrive at their destination and meet with Lavar, who will be working with them on their tusk-gathering antics. While Tarzan, he's still in a daze in his cell. Nothing seems to faze him. Even as Cheetah sneaks in and tries to break him free from his chains, he's just not moving. Jane, meanwhile, she's kind of in this dreamlike state. She's seeing flashbacks of the creepy stuff that has happened to her. All the while, this medicine man is chanting next to her. Now, she awakes and cries out for Tarzan, who seems to briefly come back to normal again, like he thinks Jane is alive. But then when Vargo comes in and tells the prisoners to be quiet, Tarzan seems to go right back to his sullen mood again. Well, anyhow, the Lycopos are hard at work building huge pens that will house the elephants. Tarzan, he still remains in that sad, gloomy state, and even though Cheetah brings him some water, it doesn't help. He's just not doing anything. Now, Vargo and Lavar, they have their lunch together, and meanwhile, Fidel leaves to do some hunting. But wouldn't you know it, the sound of his rifle causes the animals to stampede. Now, Vargo is annoyed, and he's had enough, and he tells Fidel to leave. Now, Lavar, to celebrate, breaks out the booze. Well, Jane, meanwhile, has made a full recovery and goes looking for Tarzan. She talks with Lyra and demands to know where Tarzan is. Now, Jane leaves in pursuit of Tarzan, and Fidel, at this point, returns and tells Lyra that Vargo will be selling ivory behind their back. So he's basically trying to turn her against him. Now, Jane continues on foot and watches some stock footage of a massive snake eating a panther. Wow. And she continues on her trek looking for Tarzan with Lyra, Fidel, and some of their troops in pursuit. And they end up saving Jane's life as she's almost attacked by a lion. And they bring her to the destination where they will all deal with that sneaky Varga character. And you know what? With not much time left in the film, I don't want to give away the ending, but wow, do things wrap up quickly. I was watching the clock as we neared the end of the film, and there is so much that just quickly happens in the last 5 minutes of the film. Will Tarzan and Jane be reunited, and will Tarzan finally snap out of his depressed funk? Will Lyra and Fidel stop the evil Vargo? And what will happen to the elephants? Well, you need to watch the film for yourself to see the exciting ending, to see how things turn out. So some closing thoughts. Tarzan and the She-Devil was released in 1953. It was produced by Saul Lesser and directed by Kurt Newman, who also directed two of the Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan films, Tarzan in the Amazons and Tarzan and the Leopard Woman. He also directed the original The Fly movie. Help me, help me. Now, going into this film, the title is a little bit misleading. There really is no she-devil. I mean, okay, when I'm watching this film for the first time, like most all of the films I watch and review for my channel, I really don't read a lot about the film beforehand. I don't want to spoil anything, other than the title of the film and, some of the main actors involved. And I was thinking, going into this, maybe there was a she-devil character, a femme fatale of the jungle, living in a creepy temple covered with vines, sitting on a throne with evil henchmen doing her bidding and so on. But no, it's just Monique Van Voren, who's a lovely actress, don't get me wrong, but not necessarily a she-devil. Just an ivory poacher working with a couple other creepy guys to exploit some elephants. If anything, it's Raymond Burr as one of her accomplices. It's far more menacing in this film. It's funny because I watch Raymond Burr here in the jungle, looking all gross and sweaty, and it reminds me of his role in the film Bride of the Gorilla from 1953, where he also played a big sweaty guy in the jungle. But in that one, he turned into a big gorilla. But anyhow, a couple years later, he would go on to play a very sinister antagonist in Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window. That is an amazing film. I really need a review for this channel someday. Well, let's just say that this film is really nothing like the movie poster depicts. And one of the earlier working titles, Tarzan and the Ivory Thieves, actually makes a lot more sense. But I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here. My general thoughts on the film was that while the film started really strong, and I really like seeing some of the familiar faces here like Raymond Burr and Tom Conway, I kind of thought things started to drag about halfway through the film when Tarzan, who is convinced that Jane has died, kind of just mopes through the rest of the film, right up until the very end of the movie. And I get it. Jane was his mate, and he thinks that she has died. But to me, watching this, I thought it would have been a lot more cooler to see Tarzan in mourning and then see that sadness turn into rage as he seeks revenge. That's kind of what I was hoping for, but it never really happens. He only snaps out of it really close to the end of the film when he sees that Jane is alive. And that's another thing. The end of the film is so sudden. Everything happens so quickly. You watch it and think, did the film producers just run out of money or something? I can't give away the ending, but just trust me, you would be watching it and it all just builds to just this very sudden ending and then boom, film over. But all right, don't get me wrong though, I still enjoyed the film and I still think that Lex Barker does a great job as Tarzan. This was the fifth and final time for Lex Barker to play Tarzan. He would apparently spend much of the rest of his film career making movies in Europe. Now, Joyce McKenzie stepped in to play Jane here, and I liked her as the character. I thought it was neat that she had a little bit more involvement as a character, in terms of fending off the bad guys. She's on the run. She has to escape dangerous creatures and goes off to find Tarzan by herself once she's recovered. And that was another thing maybe I would have done a little bit different in the film, is maybe see her be the one that rescues Tarzan for a change. I thought that would have been an interesting spin. But I love Tarzan movies, and the more I read about these films, the more I see that there are quite a few Tarzan films from the golden age of Hollywood. So I do plan to visit these in the near future. But for now, that's my review of Tarzan and the She-Devil. It was a fun story, even with the sulky Tarzan through most of the latter half of the film. I still enjoyed it anyway. There's lots of entertaining characters here. I like Cheetah's silly antics. And it was a decent final outing for Lex Barker as the character of Tarzan. This is a good film, and it's one worth checking out.